FIA makes final decision on Mercedes engine. After emergency meeting, McLaren reveals shocking upgrade plan, and Alpine reveals key Mercedes engine advantage. What happens when Formula One's most successful team finds a loophole that could change everything? Just days ago, the motorsport world was thrown into chaos when news broke about Mercedes potentially gaining an unfair advantage through a controversial engine modification. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The Formula One winter break has been anything but quiet this year. While fans were expecting the usual driver transfers and team updates, we got something far more explosive. Mercedes, the team that dominated the hybrid era from 2014 to 2020, appears to have discovered a way to extract more power from their engines than what the regulations seemingly allow. And the fallout has been absolutely massive. Let me break down exactly what's happening here because this story has more layers than you might think. At the heart of this controversy is something called compression ratio. Think of it as how much the engine squeezes the fuel and air mixture before ignition. The tighter you squeeze it, the more power you can potentially extract. Formula One regulations clearly state that engines cannot exceed a compression ratio of 16:1. That's the rule, black and white, no exceptions. But here's where Mercedes got creative. They've apparently developed a system that allows their engines to operate within the legal 16:1 limit when measured during standard technical inspections, but then somehow increase that ratio when the engines are actually running at racing temperatures on track. It's like having a car that passes the speed limit check at the police station but then magically goes faster on the highway without technically breaking any rules. The genius of this approach lies in the technicality. When the FIA officials check the engines with their standard procedures at room temperature, everything appears completely legal. The compression ratio measures exactly at the mandated limit. But once those engines heat up during actual racing conditions, something changes internally that allows for a higher compression ratio. More compression means more power, and more power means faster lap times. Now, you might be wondering how this is even possible from an engineering standpoint. While the exact mechanism hasn't been publicly revealed, it likely involves components that expand or contract differently as temperatures change. Perhaps specially designed pistons or cylinder heads that alter their dimensions as the engine warms up. The engineering required to achieve this would be absolutely cutting edge, which explains why only Mercedes has successfully implemented it so far. The reaction from rival manufacturers has been swift and predictable. Audi has led the charge in opposing this innovation, with Honda and Ferrari also filing formal complaints. These companies have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in their own engine development programs. And suddenly they're facing the possibility that Mercedes has gained a significant advantage through what they see as a dubious interpretation of the rules. But here's what makes this story even more interesting. Mercedes didn't try to hide this development. From the very beginning, they were completely transparent with the FIA about their approach. They knew that attempting to secretly implement such a system would be catastrophic if discovered. Instead, they took their ideas directly to the governing body and essentially asked for permission before proceeding. This transparency was crucial because developing an engine takes years and costs enormous amounts of money. Mercedes would never risk investing those resources into something that could be declared illegal at the last minute. By maintaining open communication with the FIA throughout the development process, they protected themselves from exactly the kind of controversy we're seeing now. And that's where the plot twist comes in. Despite all the complaints and protests from rival manufacturers, the FIA has officially ruled that Mercedes' system is completely legal. The governing body has maintained their position that as long as the engine passes the standard technical inspections, it complies with the regulations. The fact that the compression ratio changes during actual racing conditions doesn't violate the rules as they're currently written. This decision has massive implications for the upcoming season. Mercedes-powered teams, which include not just the Works Mercedes squad, but also customer teams, will have access to this technology. Even more significantly, Red Bull has apparently been working on their own version of this system, and will also be allowed to use it later in the season. The timing of this ruling is particularly important. With the season starting in just a few weeks in Australia, any changes to the regulations at this point would create chaos. 6 teams use either Mercedes or Red Bull power units, and forcing them to completely redesign their engines. Weeks before the first race would be practically impossible. But let's talk about what this means for the competitive balance of Formula One. Mercedes has struggled in recent years after the dominance of their early hybrid era. They've been searching for ways to close the gap to teams like Red Bull and Ferrari. This compression ratio innovation could be exactly the breakthrough they needed to return to championship contention. The psychological impact cannot be understated either. Other manufacturers now know that Mercedes has gained an advantage through superior engineering and interpretation of the regulations. This puts additional pressure on Honda, Ferrari, and the upcoming Alpine power unit program to find their own innovative solutions or risk falling behind. What's particularly fascinating is how this situation highlights the constant chess match between teams and regulators in Formula One. The sport has always been about finding competitive advantages within the rules, but rarely do we see such a clear example of one team gaining a significant edge through pure technical innovation combined with regulatory interpretation. The controversy also raises questions about the spirit versus the letter of the law. Mercedes has clearly complied with the technical regulations as written, but some argue they violated the intended spirit of those rules. This philosophical debate has raged in Formula One for decades, from the ground effect cars of the late 70s to the double diffuser controversy of 2009. Looking ahead, this decision sets an interesting precedent. It essentially tells teams that as long as they can pass the required technical inspections, they're free to pursue innovative solutions that might push the boundaries of what was originally intended. This could encourage even more creative engineering approaches in future seasons. The financial implications are staggering as well. Teams that don't have access to this technology may need to invest heavily in their own research and development to stay competitive. For smaller manufacturers or customer teams, this creates an additional burden that could impact their performance for years to come. As we approach the new season, all eyes will be on whether Mercedes can translate this technical advantage into actual racing success. Having a more powerful engine is certainly beneficial, but Formula One's success depends on the entire package, including aerodynamics, suspension, strategy, and driver performance. History has shown us that technical advantages don't always guarantee championship victories. The saga of Mercedes's compression ratio innovation perfectly encapsulates what makes Formula One so compelling. It's not just about who has the fastest car or the best driver, but also about who can most cleverly interpret and exploit the regulations to gain a competitive edge. As the new season unfolds, we'll discover whether this controversial but legal innovation will reshape the championship battle or become just another footnote in Formula One's long history of technical intrigue. Formula One fans, buckle up because we need to talk about something absolutely fascinating happening right now in the paddock. While everyone's buzzing about the revolutionary new cars coming in this season, McLaren just dropped a bombshell that's making waves throughout the entire grid. The reigning world champions are doing something completely different from their rivals, and it might just be the smartest move we've seen in years. Picture this. You've just won the championship, you're on top of the world, and everyone expects you to come out swinging with aggressive upgrades and flashy new parts. But instead, McLaren is taking the complete opposite approach. They're essentially saying no to the temptation of early upgrades, and their reasoning will blow your mind. Here's what's happening behind the scenes that nobody's talking about. The new regulations for this season are so complex and revolutionary that teams are essentially flying blind. We're talking about completely new power units, chassis rules that throw everything we knew out the window, and aerodynamic packages that are unlike anything we've seen before. Most teams are panicking and throwing parts at their cars, hoping something sticks. But McLaren? They're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. The MCL40 is about to make its debut at the Barcelona test next week. But here's the kicker. McLaren isn't even showing up on day one. While their competitors are scrambling to get track time, McLaren is still back at the dyno facility in Austria, fine-tuning every single component until the very last moment. This isn't laziness or overconfidence. This is strategic brilliance. Rob Marshall, McLaren's chief designer, just revealed something that should terrify every other team on the grid. He essentially said that understanding their new platform is infinitely more important than bolting on random upgrades without knowing why they work. Think about that for a second. While Ferrari is openly admitting they're bringing what they call a basic specification car to testing, McLaren is pushing development right up to the absolute limit to arrive with their most competitive package possible. This philosophical difference is staggering. Ferrari's team boss, Fred Vasseur, basically admitted that everyone will show up to Barcelona with what he calls a specification A car, meaning a basic version that they'll upgrade later. His entire strategy revolves around getting mileage and validating reliability rather than chasing ultimate performance from day one. It's the safe approach, the conventional wisdom that says you need to walk before you can run. But McLaren is completely rejecting this conventional thinking. Andrea Stella, their team boss, dropped this incredible insight about their competitors. He suggested that by rushing to get their cars ready for early filming days, rivals might have locked themselves into design compromises too early in the development cycle. Think about the implications here. While teams like Mercedes, Alpine, and Racing Bulls were doing publicity runs with potentially compromised cars, McLaren was still iterating and perfecting. The technical complexity we're dealing with this season is absolutely mind-blowing. Mark Temple, McLaren's technical director, revealed something that perfectly illustrates just how much teams don't know about these new machines. He admitted that they don't even know the correct rake angle yet. For those who might not know, rake is fundamental to how a Formula One car generates downforce and handles. It's like building a house without knowing what foundation you need. We're looking at a complete shift in aerodynamic philosophy. The cars from recent years ran incredibly low to the ground, almost scraping the asphalt to maximize the ground effect from their floor tunnels. But these new regulations are creating something entirely different. Early footage from the few teams that have run suggests we might be returning to the high rake concepts we saw before the ground effect era, with cars that look dramatically different on track. Temple's explanation of this evolution is fascinating. He described how the previous generation of cars were essentially slaves to ride height, where millimeters of clearance could make or break your aerodynamic performance. The new rules promise more freedom to tune the car's attitude for handling characteristics rather than just pure downforce generation. But here's the catch. Nobody really knows how to exploit this freedom yet. The energy recovery systems add another layer of complexity that's unprecedented. These new power units will harvest and deploy energy in ways that fundamentally change how drivers approach braking zones and corner entry. The handling characteristics needed to maximize this technology are completely unknown territory. Every team is essentially doing scientific research in real time. McLaren's approach becomes even more brilliant when you consider the timing constraints. If a team discovers something crucial during the Bahrain test, there simply won't be time to implement major changes before the Australian Grand Prix. By investing maximum development time before their first track session, McLaren is potentially avoiding the frantic catch-up game that could define the early season for other teams. The suspension configuration alone tells a story of how deep the technical revolution goes. McLaren has switched from pull rod to push rod front suspension on the MCL40. A change that might seem minor but actually represents a complete aerodynamic philosophy shift. Temple explained that this decision was entirely driven by their new front wing package, which is completely different from anything they've run before. What makes this even more intriguing is the psychological aspect. McLaren enters this season as the team to beat, carrying the pressure and expectations that come with being champions. The easy path would be to follow the pack, do what everyone else is doing, and rely on their proven formula. Instead, they're doubling down on their conviction that thorough understanding trumps rapid iteration. The manufacturing and logistics story behind this strategy is equally compelling. While other teams transported their cars weeks ago for filming days and early shakedowns, the MCL40 is literally being flown directly from the Austrian test facility to Barcelona. This means they're maximizing every possible hour of development time, even at the cost of early publicity and track familiarization. Consider the confidence this represents. McLaren is betting their championship defense on the belief that a few extra days of development are worth more than several days of actual track running. In a sport where every thousandth of a second matters, where drivers spend hundreds of hours in simulators to find tiny gains, McLaren is sacrificing real-world data for theoretical perfection. The competitive implications extend far beyond just McLaren. If their methodical approach pays off and they emerge from early testing with a significant advantage, it could force every other team to completely rethink their development philosophy. We could witness a fundamental shift in how Formula One teams approach new regulations in the future. The stakes couldn't be higher. Revolutionary rule changes like these typically shuffle the competitive order dramatically. Teams that dominated under the previous regulations often struggle to adapt, while others find unexpected speed. McLaren's strategy represents either masterful preparation or catastrophic overconfidence, and we won't know which until they finally hit the track. What we're witnessing is essentially a high-stakes gamble disguised as methodical engineering. McLaren is betting that their deeper understanding of a more refined package will overcome any disadvantages from reduced track time. It's the difference between studying for an exam until the last minute versus showing up early but less prepared. In Formula One, there are no retakes. The next few weeks will reveal whether McLaren's patient approach represents the future of Formula One development or a costly miscalculation. But one thing is certain, they're not following the crowd, and in a sport where marginal gains determine champions, that kind of independent thinking might just be exactly what keeps them on top. Imagine watching the future of Formula One unfold in real time, witnessing a moment that could reshape the entire championship battle for years to come. That's exactly what happened when Mercedes rolled out their revolutionary W17 at Silverstone, marking their first serious attempt at conquering the new 2026 regulations. But here's what nobody is talking about. This wasn't just another shakedown run. This was Mercedes making a statement that could change everything we thought we knew about the upcoming season. Picture this scene. A cold, wet January morning at Silverstone, mist hanging over the legendary British circuit as the sound of a completely new breed of Formula One car breaks through the silence. The Mercedes W17, their weapon for the 2026 championship, emerges from the garage with George Russell behind the wheel. This isn't your typical car launch with fancy lights and corporate speeches. This is raw, unfiltered racing development happening right before our eyes. What makes this moment so significant goes far beyond just another team completing their mandatory filming day. Mercedes has positioned themselves as potentially the most prepared team entering this radical new era of Formula One. While other manufacturers are still figuring out the complexities of the 2026 power unit regulations, Mercedes appears to have already found their rhythm. The confidence they displayed during this shakedown suggests they've unlocked something their competitors haven't quite grasped yet. The technical implications of what we witnessed at Silverstone cannot be overstated. The 2026 regulations represent the most dramatic change Formula One has seen in decades. We're talking about cars that will produce significantly more electrical power while reducing internal combustion engine output. The aerodynamic philosophy has been completely reimagined, with active aerodynamics becoming a crucial performance differentiator. Teams that master these new concepts early will have an enormous advantage throughout the entire regulation cycle. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli shared driving duties during this crucial first outing, completing 67 laps around Silverstone's international circuit layout. That might not sound like much compared to a full test session, but every single lap counted. These weren't just installation laps to check if the car would start and run safely. These were data-gathering missions, with engineers back at Mercedes headquarters analyzing every piece of telemetry, every aerodynamic flow pattern, every power unit characteristic. The psychological aspect of this shakedown extends far beyond Mercedes themselves. Every other team on the grid was watching these sessions closely, trying to decode what Mercedes had discovered about the new regulations. When you see a car running smoothly on its first day out, completing its planned mileage without any significant issues, it sends a clear message to the competition. Mercedes isn't just ready for 2026, they might already be ahead of the curve. Kimi Antonelli's involvement in this shakedown adds another fascinating layer to the story. Here's a driver who will be competing in his first full Formula One season, getting his initial taste of what promises to be one of the most competitive eras in the sport's history. The fact that Mercedes trusted him with precious track time during such a crucial session speaks volumes about their confidence in his abilities and their long-term planning approach. The partnership announcement with Microsoft, prominently displayed on the W17's airbox, represents more than just a sponsorship deal. In an era where data processing and artificial intelligence are becoming increasingly important to race performance, having a technology giant like Microsoft as a partner could provide Mercedes with computational advantages their competitors can't match. The timing of this announcement alongside the shakedown suggests these aren't separate developments, but part of a coordinated strategy. Behind the scenes, Andrew Shovlin and his engineering team have been working toward this moment for years. The head of Trackside Engineering's comments about ensuring everything operates safely and reliably might sound routine, but they mask the incredible complexity of what Mercedes has achieved. Building a car that runs flawlessly on its first outing under completely new regulations requires a level of simulation accuracy and engineering precision that few teams can match. The weather conditions at Silverstone actually provided an unexpected bonus for Mercedes. Running in wet and cold conditions gave them data under challenging circumstances that many teams won't experience until much later in the development process. Every lap in these conditions taught them something valuable about how their car behaves when grip levels are low and temperatures are suboptimal. Team principal Toto Wolff's trackside presence during the shakedown wasn't just ceremonial. His decision to personally oversee this crucial session demonstrates how important Mercedes considers this moment in their championship preparations. Wolff understands better than anyone that early advantages in a new regulation cycle can compound throughout the entire era, potentially determining championship outcomes for years to come. The strategic timing of this shakedown, coming after several other teams had already completed their filming days, allowed Mercedes to observe what their competitors were doing before revealing their own approach. This timing suggests a level of confidence in their development program that extends beyond just having a reliable car. They're betting that their fundamental interpretation of the regulations is superior to what others have produced. Looking ahead to the Barcelona pre-season testing, Mercedes now enters with a significant psychological advantage. They've proven their car can run reliably, they've gathered crucial baseline data, and they've sent a clear message to the entire paddock about their 2026 ambitions. The question now becomes whether this early promise will translate into sustained performance throughout the season. The implications for the championship battle are enormous. If Mercedes has indeed cracked the code on the 2026 regulations early, we could be looking at a return to their dominant form from the hybrid era's beginning. The combination of George Russell's proven speed and Kimi Antonelli's fresh perspective could create a formidable driver lineup capable of maximizing whatever performance advantage the W17 might possess. As we move closer to the season opener, remember this moment at Silverstone. What appeared to be a routine shakedown might very well have been the opening move in Mercedes' campaign to reclaim their position at the top of Formula One. The 2026 season just became a lot more interesting. What if I told you that Alpine just made the most controversial decision in Formula One that could either propel them to championship glory or destroy their French heritage forever? The 2026 season is about to witness one of the biggest gambles in motorsport history, and the early signs are absolutely mind-blowing. When Alpine shocked the Formula One world by announcing their switch from Renault to Mercedes power units for 2026, the paddock erupted in disbelief. Here's a French team, with decades of Renault DNA coursing through their veins, suddenly abandoning their own engines for their biggest rival's technology. It was like watching Ferrari announce they were switching to Honda engines, or McLaren deciding to use Renault power again after their disastrous partnership years ago. But here's where this story gets absolutely fascinating, and why you need to pay attention to every single detail I'm about to share with you. Because what seemed like a desperate move might actually be the most genius strategic play we've seen in modern Formula One. Let me paint you the picture of what really happened behind closed doors. Renault, the parent company of Alpine, looked at their engine development program and basically said, "We're not throwing any more money at this project." Think about that for a second. A manufacturer with over a century of motorsport heritage, multiple championship wins, and some of the most iconic engines in Formula One history just walked away from their own team. That's not just controversial, that's absolutely brutal. The immediate reaction from fans and experts was predictably savage. Social media exploded with accusations of Alpine selling their soul, abandoning their French identity, and basically admitting defeat before the battle even began. Critics argued that if your own parent company won't invest in your success, why should anyone else believe in your championship dreams? But here's where everyone got it completely wrong, and why this decision might be the smartest move Alpine has ever made. Because while everyone was focused on the emotional and political aspects of this engine swap, the technical team at Enstone was quietly building something extraordinary. The 2026 Formula One regulations represent the biggest technical revolution since the hybrid era began in 2014. We're talking about a complete reimagining of how these cars generate power, how they handle aerodynamically, and most importantly for today's discussion, how much they weigh. The minimum weight limit has been slashed from 800 kilograms down to 768 kilograms, which might not sound like much, but in Formula One terms, that's absolutely massive. Here's where Alpine's story becomes absolutely incredible. While other teams are scrambling to meet these new weight requirements, sources are reporting that Alpine's 2026 Challenger is already hitting that magical 768 kilogram target. Let me explain why this is such a big deal and why it could change everything we thought we knew about this Mercedes engine decision. Every single kilogram of excess weight in a Formula One car translates to approximately 3 to 4 tenths of a second per lap. In a sport where championships are decided by thousandths of a second, we're talking about the difference between pole position and starting 10th on the grid. When the 2022 regulations were introduced, most teams started the season significantly overweight, and the teams that could shed those extra kilograms first gained massive competitive advantages. Now imagine Alpine rolling up to the first race of 2026 with a car that's already at the minimum weight while their competitors are potentially 10 or more kilograms heavier. We're talking about a potential advantage of over a second per lap, which in Formula One terms is absolutely devastating. That's the difference between fighting for podiums and being stuck in the midfield. But the weight advantage is just the beginning of this incredible story. The Mercedes power unit that Alpine will be using has been consistently praised as one of the most reliable and powerful engines on the current grid. Mercedes has won 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships, and their engine technology has been the foundation of that unprecedented success. By switching to Mercedes power, Alpine isn't just getting an engine, they're getting access to years of championship-winning development and expertise. The aerodynamic development at Alpine is also reportedly making significant progress. While the specific details remain closely guarded secrets, insiders suggest that the French team has made substantial strides in understanding the complex new aerodynamic regulations for 2026. Combined with the Mercedes engine and the lightweight chassis, this creates a perfect storm of competitive advantages. Here's where this story gets even more interesting. The psychological impact of this decision on the entire Alpine organization cannot be underestimated. For years, the team has been operating under the shadow of Renault's inconsistent commitment to Formula One. Engineers and designers knew that their engine department was underfunded and under-resourced compared to their rivals. This created a culture of making do with less, of accepting compromise, of always being the underdog by design, rather than by choice. The Mercedes deal represents a fundamental shift in mentality. Suddenly, Alpine has access to the same engine technology as the most successful team in modern Formula One history. The confidence boost this provides to engineers, mechanics, and drivers cannot be quantified, but is absolutely real. When you know you have championship-winning tools at your disposal, you start thinking like champions. The financial implications are equally significant. Developing a competitive Formula One engine costs hundreds of millions of dollars annually. By outsourcing this to Mercedes, Alpine can redirect those resources toward aerodynamics, chassis development, and other critical areas where they can gain competitive advantages. It's essentially a reallocation of limited resources toward areas where they can have the biggest impact. Flavio Briatore's return to Alpine adds another fascinating dimension to this story. Love him or hate him, Briatore knows how to build championship-winning teams. His track record with Benetton and Renault proves that he understands the political, technical, and strategic elements required for Formula One success. His endorsement of the Mercedes engine deal suggests there's a bigger picture strategy at play here. The competitive landscape for 2026 is shaping up to be absolutely wild. With major regulation changes, every team essentially starts from zero. Historical advantages become irrelevant, and the teams that best interpret and implement the new rules will rise to the top. Alpine's combination of Mercedes power, lightweight construction, and improved aerodynamics could position them perfectly for this reset, but there are challenges ahead that could derail this entire plan. The biggest question mark remains whether Alpine's aerodynamic package will be competitive against other Mercedes-powered teams like McLaren and potentially Aston Martin. Having the same engine is great, but if your competitors have better aerodynamics, suspension, or overall chassis design, that engine advantage disappears quickly. The integration challenges cannot be ignored either. Switching engine suppliers isn't just about bolting a different power unit into your chassis. It requires complete redesign of cooling systems, electrical architecture, suspension mounting points, and countless other technical elements. Any mistakes in this integration process could negate all the potential advantages we've discussed. The pressure on Alpine to deliver results immediately will be immense. This controversial decision will only be vindicated by on-track performance. If Alpine struggles in 2026, every poor result will be blamed on abandoning their Renault heritage. The criticism will be relentless and potentially career-ending for key decision-makers. However, if this gamble pays off, if Alpine emerges as a consistent front-runner or even championship contender in 2026, it will be remembered as one of the boldest and most successful strategic moves in Formula One history. The French team would prove that sometimes you need to abandon tradition and heritage to create a winning future. The timing of this decision also reflects broader changes in Formula One's power unit landscape. With new manufacturers potentially entering the sport and existing relationships constantly evolving, Alpine's move to Mercedes might be the first domino in a series of major supplier changes across the grid. As we approach the 2026 season, Alpine's Mercedes gamble represents everything that makes Formula One compelling. High stakes, massive risks, technological innovation, and the constant pursuit of marginal gains that can transform also-rans into champions. Whether this decision will be remembered as genius or disaster remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Alpine has positioned themselves at the center of Formula One's next great chapter. The lightweight car, proven Mercedes power, and renewed organizational confidence create a perfect storm of opportunity. If Alpine can execute their vision flawlessly, the 2026 season might witness the rebirth of French Formula One dominance in the most unexpected way possible. Picture this scenario. You're a Formula One driver with 5 years of experience, 124 career points, and you think you've done enough to secure your future. Then suddenly, you find yourself without a race seat. This is exactly what happened to Yuki Tsunoda, and his story might just be the most intriguing subplot of the 2026 Formula One season. What makes Tsunoda's situation fascinating isn't just that he lost his drive, it's what happened next. Instead of being completely cast aside, Red Bull made a calculated decision that could reshape their entire 2026 campaign. They kept him as a reserve driver, and now Formula One's own chief executive is telling him to stay ready for an immediate return to the grid. Let's dive into why Yuki Tsunoda's Formula One story is far from over, and how this Japanese driver could become the dark horse that changes everything in 2026. The shocking demotion that nobody saw coming hit Tsunoda after what many considered a solid 2025 season. After 5 years, racing for the Red Bull family, accumulating respectable points and showing consistent improvement, Tsunoda expected to continue his Formula One journey alongside Max Verstappen, or at the very least maintain his position within the Red Bull ecosystem. However, Red Bull had different plans. They promoted Isaac Hadjar to the main Red Bull team and brought Arvid Lindblad up to Racing Bulls. effectively leaving Tsunoda without a race seat for 2026. The decision blindsided many in the paddock, including Tsunoda himself, who didn't hide his disappointment and frustration with the situation. When asked about his feelings regarding the news, Tsunoda expressed his genuine emotions without diplomatic sugarcoating. He admitted to being disappointed and angry about the decision, which demonstrated the raw humanity behind the helmet that fans rarely see from Formula One drivers. What made the situation even more challenging for Tsunoda was his contractual position. Unlike drivers who might shop themselves to other teams when faced with similar circumstances, Tsunoda found his options severely limited by his existing Red Bull contract. While he mentioned receiving interest from external parties, the terms of his agreement prevented him from pursuing those opportunities seriously. This contractual binding initially seemed like a career death sentence, but it actually became the foundation for what could be an incredible comeback story. Red Bull's decision to retain Tsunoda as a reserve driver rather than release him entirely reveals their strategic thinking and suggests they see value in keeping him within their organization. The reserve driver role that Tsunoda now occupies isn't just a consolation prize. It's a strategic position that could prove invaluable to Red Bull's 2026 ambitions. Team principal Laurent Mekies explicitly stated that Tsunoda would provide crucial support to their 2026 projects, indicating that his experience and knowledge base are considered assets worth preserving. Tsunoda brings something unique to the table that no other driver in the Red Bull system possesses: intimate knowledge of both Red Bull and Racing Bull's machinery from recent seasons. While the 2026 cars will introduce revolutionary changes including shorter dimensions, lighter weight, and active aerodynamics, Tsunoda's understanding of how both teams' previous cars behaved provides invaluable baseline knowledge. This experience becomes even more significant when considering that both Red Bull teams have essentially rookie lineups for 2026. Hajar and Lindblad, while talented, lack the extensive Formula One experience that Tsunoda has accumulated over his 5 seasons. If either driver struggles to adapt to Formula One's demands or fails to deliver expected results, Tsunoda represents an immediately available solution with proven capability. The technical aspect of Tsunoda's value cannot be overstated. Over his 5 years in Formula One, he has developed from a raw talent into a mature driver with significantly improved technical feedback capabilities. This evolution makes him an ideal candidate to assist both teams in understanding their car's characteristics and development directions. Formula One CEO Stefano Domenicali's public encouragement for Tsunoda to remain ready represents a significant endorsement from the sport's highest authority. During Honda's 2026 engine launch, Domenicali specifically addressed Tsunoda's situation, emphasizing that opportunities could arise quickly in Formula One's unpredictable environment. Domenicali's comments weren't just pleasantries. They reflected the reality of Formula One's competitive nature. With only 22 seats available across all teams, every position is precious, and circumstances can change rapidly. Injuries, performance issues, or other unforeseen situations could create openings that require immediate responses. The Formula One chief's message to Tsunoda about being resilient and ready carries weight because it comes from someone who understands the sport's dynamics intimately. Domenicali has witnessed countless careers take unexpected turns, and his advice suggests genuine belief that Tsunoda's Formula One story isn't finished. Adding another layer of intrigue to Tsunoda's situation is the involvement of Honda, his longtime supporter. While Honda has moved from Red Bull to partner with Aston Martin for their 2026 engine supply, they haven't forgotten about their Japanese driver. Honda Racing Corporation President Koji Watanabe has confirmed ongoing negotiations regarding Tsunoda's future utilization. These discussions between Honda and Red Bull could create additional pathways for Tsunoda's return to active competition. Honda's perspective introduces external pressure and support that could influence Red Bull's decision-making regarding Tsunoda's role. The Japanese manufacturer clearly sees value in maintaining their connection with their most successful Formula One driver in recent years. The negotiations mentioned by Watanabe suggest that Tsunoda's situation remains fluid rather than fixed. Depending on the terms that Red Bull proposes, the scope of Honda's ability to utilize Tsunoda could expand significantly. This dynamic creates multiple potential scenarios for Tsunoda's 2026 involvement and beyond. Looking ahead to 2027, Honda's partnership with Aston Martin could present entirely new opportunities for Tsunoda. If Honda maintains their relationship with their Japanese driver and Aston Martin seeks proven talent, Tsunoda could find himself in a completely different environment with renewed career prospects. The unique circumstances surrounding Tsunoda's current position make him one of the most interesting figures to watch during the 2026 season. Unlike typical reserve drivers who might only get opportunities due to injuries or emergencies, Tsunoda represents a proven commodity waiting for his moment to return. Red Bull's decision to keep Tsunoda in reserve rather than releasing him suggests they anticipate potential scenarios where his services might be needed. Whether this stems from concerns about their rookie driver's readiness or simply wanting experienced backup available, the strategic implications are clear. The pressure on both Hajar and Lindblad to perform immediately becomes more intense, knowing that an experienced replacement sits ready in the wings. This dynamic could actually benefit Red Bull by ensuring their young drivers remain focused and motivated, while providing management with confidence that alternatives exist if needed. For Tsunoda personally, this period represents both challenge and opportunity. The disappointment of losing his race seat must be balanced against the possibility that his demotion could be temporary. Maintaining physical and mental readiness while serving in a reserve capacity requires tremendous discipline and mental strength. The psychological aspect of Tsunoda's situation shouldn't be underestimated. Staying match-ready without regular race competition presents unique challenges that only the most dedicated professionals can handle successfully. His ability to remain sharp and prepared could determine whether he capitalizes on any opportunities that arise. From a broader perspective, Tsunoda's story reflects Formula One's ruthless competitive environment, where even established drivers face uncertainty. However, it also demonstrates how perseverance and maintaining professional relationships can create unexpected opportunities for redemption and renewed success. The 2026 Formula One season promises to be unpredictable with new regulations, fresh driver lineups, and evolving team dynamics. In this environment of change and uncertainty, Yuki Tsunoda's position as the experienced driver waiting in the wings makes him one of the most compelling storylines to follow. Whether he returns to racing in 2026, moves to a different team in 2027, or finds alternative pathways back to the grid, Tsunoda's journey represents the resilience and determination that define Formula One's most memorable careers. His story reminds us that in Formula One, being ready for opportunity is just as important as creating it. Stefano Domenicali's advice to be ready wasn't just encouraging words. It was recognition that Tsunoda's Formula One chapter likely isn't finished. Sometimes the most dramatic comeback stories begin with the most devastating setbacks, and Yuki Tsunoda's current position might just be the setup for one of those remarkable returns that makes Formula One so captivating to follow.